Hey guys, Tammy here. And in this video, I'm going to talk about transition tantrums. Now, it's kind of funny. Most of you know that both my sons help me, and one of them in particular does the video editing. And when I was telling him what the topic of this particular video was going to be, he said, "Well, you don't have to have transitions to have tantrums." My grandson, his son is about 2.5 to 3. So, as you know, that's a big age, or if you haven't hit that age, be forewarned, that's a big age for tantrums. But the specific thing that we're going to talk about today is tantrums that happen when the child transitions back to you from the other parent. As we dive into this topic, let me just remind you, if you like this content, don't forget to hit like on the video and also subscribe to the channel so that you get notified when new videos are released. And as always, please share this on your social media platforms. So many people looking for help for all these little questions. So we want to try to get it out to as many people as we can. This looks different depending on the child's age. Obviously, when they're teenagers, they're probably not hitting and biting and throwing things, which is what we typically see out of the particularly young ones under 5. But even between 5 and 10, we still see a lot of that kind of physical acting out. Most of the time when they get into preteens and teenagers, it becomes more, I think, withdrawal, being grumpy, kind of being short with you, rude, sometimes screaming and yelling, depending on the child, all that kind of stuff. But when they're little, it takes more of the form, like I said, of that physical violence. And so I think it's kind of helpful to dive in a little bit as to why, because I think that'll help you maybe kind of have a little more patience around it. And then what can you do about it? Obviously, is always the question that I'm trying to answer for you. So why does this happen is the first question. Well, I find that what happens is children are trying to emotionally self-regulate, but they don't know how. They don't know proper ways how. They haven't learned that through life. They haven't been taught those skills yet. Sometimes we don't, we aren't taught those skills as children at all. And we have to go out into the adult world and sort of have our, teeth kicked in a couple times before we start figuring it out. The emotional self-regulation piece is what they're really trying to do. And, it's interesting because over the years, every few years, the ideas of how to parent and, what works and what doesn't and what produces good outcomes and bad outcomes and all that kind of changes. And when my kids were really young, one of the schools of thought was let them cry it out. That's how you teach them to self-soothe, right? I think we've moved kind of more into a gentle parenting era because we have figured out that that's not maybe the best way to do it. But that was the school of thought, when my kids were young. So whatever, you feel is appropriate in helping your children learn that, just know that that's the problem that they're facing. They feel frustrated. They feel tired. They feel emotional upheaval transitioning between the two worlds. And let's face it, if you're dealing with a narcissistic co-parent, think back to what that was like for you in that relationship. If any of you are like me, and I have a feeling many of you are, we walked around on eggshells, right? We walked around trying to make sure nothing upset the other person or triggered them into an episode, right? That we had to then endure the brunt of. That relationship was characterized by walking on eggshells. And so that may very well be what your child is doing when they're over there, especially if they heavily identify with you or have similar, emotional makeup as you, then they're going to have a similar experience as you in dealing with that other parent. And up until the point of separation, you were kind of that buffer and you're no longer present to be that buffer. So now they're having to figure it out without that. That's where the frustration and everything comes. And so they walk around on eggshells. They hold all their little emotions in. Kids are very, very bright and they learn very quickly. If I do A, that parent's going to react and do B, or I'm going to get yelled at, or I'm going to get this, or I'm going to get that. And they're always trying to please their parent. They always want that attention and that focus and for their parent to be happy. They are turning in and internalizing all of that stuff and holding on to it until they get back to you. Now, if they are letting all that out once they get to you, what that essentially tells you is that you are their emotional safe space. They feel free to express their anger and their frustration to you, and they probably don't feel like that's going to cause any permanent damage to the relationship with you because you've created a secure bond with them to where they know you're going to love them no matter what. They don't have that assurance in the other world. That's why they don't act out there and they do act out with you. Now, that's a positive thing, right? The reason that it's happening is actually a positive in your world, but it doesn't feel like a positive when it's happening. And, I've seen clients that even have a little bit older children, like even like 7, 8, 9, where that child will come and they'll, just tear the house apart and scratch and bite and really hurt the parent. Like I have seen examples of that. So don't feel like this is just you. Don't feel like there's something wrong with the way you're handling it. Don't feel like there's something wrong with the child. Just know that this is a little bit kind of part of it, especially when, like I said, you're dealing with that narcissistic parent on the other side and the child's emotional needs just aren't being met over there. They learn to just kind of shut down and wait till they get back to you to have their emotional needs met. Now, the obvious answer to any of this is therapy for the child, right? That's the number one thing that you can do for them. And sometimes we have little children, right, where therapy isn't an option yet. I have seen therapists work with children as young as 3 years old. That's typically the starting point. Most of the time, a 2-year-old they won't take. 1-year-old, obviously, can't even communicate or anything yet. So usually around 3, when they can, have a fair amount of verbal skills and they can at least do play therapy, that's usually where we see it. So if you have those types of concerns, you really want to get them started in therapy right away. And I always tell people, like, even if you're just taking them once a month, just to have that touch point, just to have somebody that they're comfortable with, that they get used to. And that way, if there really is anything of great concern going on in the other world, there's going to be a trusted person there that they can tell, and you're not waiting until there's a crisis point and then scrambling to try to find a therapist. I will also tell you that if you're wanting to get the child in therapy and the other parent won't agree, there are some techniques for that. And the first thing I would tell you is don't send a message saying, well, the child's always having a fit when they come back from your house, so I think they need therapy. The other parent's going to go, no, especially if they're a narcissist. So you have to learn to frame things a little differently. You have to say something like, I noticed the child is struggling, seems to be having some behavioral issues. I think they're having trouble adjusting to us living in separate homes. And I'm wondering how you might feel about, finding a therapist for them just to help them kind of cope with some of this. Just like that. Just like it's a we problem. It's a mutual problem. It's not there's a problem in your home, because that's going to shut them down every time. Again, if you can get them into therapy, if the other parent absolutely refuses, I find that courts are very, very proactive on ordering therapy. I always tell people, if you file something and you ask for an order for therapy because the other parent won't agree or you guys can't agree on who or whatever, I find the courts, I don't know if I've ever seen the court say no to therapy for anybody in the family. So it's kind of a pretty easy thing to get. So if you're having any trouble getting it, that might be the route to go. Or maybe you just wait until the next time you have to go in on a bigger issue and you kind of bundle that with it. We don't always want to run and file something over every little issue. The last piece of this is, I would say, you have to remember these are teachable moments. So these experiences and these lessons that your children are going through are things that are going to serve them the rest of their life. And I think we always tend to look at these experiences in kind of a negative way because we have this ideal that we want their childhood to be perfect, but no child has a perfect childhood, right? Was your childhood perfect? I'm guessing no, mine wasn't either. I had great parents, but my childhood wasn't perfect because my parents aren't perfect. There's going to be struggles, and there's going to be life lessons come out of that. And how those things are handled is really what shapes your child's future resilience. And so, one of the things that you want to do if you have a really small child is kind of help them identify the feelings. That's part of starting with emotional self regulation. They throw something, maybe instead of screaming and yelling and getting upset yourself, you try to remain calm and say, "Hey, it looks like you're really frustrated. I can understand, but we're not going to throw toys. That's not okay. And if you're going to throw your toy, then I'm going to have to give you a timeout because that's not okay." And if they're old enough, try to talk to them about their feelings. Wow, you know, you're, you're really acting out. Is there something, going on that I don't like the way you're speaking to me? That's not okay. You can't talk to mom that way. You can't talk to dad that way. Are you upset about something? Are you feeling angry? What does it feel like inside your body? And just trying to help them kind of identify what's happening. And sometimes in the moment, they're so out of control, you can't do anything except maybe give the timeout or whatever form of discipline you use, and then wait till everything calms down and then come back around and try to deal with it. I will tell you that, my stepsons were 1 and 2 when I met Thomas. And so they were very young. And some of the things that we did that were really helpful is at transition. One of the things that helps is if you can kind of go into a neutral territory in between the transitions. And this is why school transitions are helpful if they're old enough, because they go from one parent's home into the school, then out to the other parent's home. And it just sort of naturally helps that emotional transition a little bit better. And so when they're going directly from one parent's house to the other, it's a little more abrupt and difficult. I've had people do things like stop at a park for 10 minutes or go into a McDonald's and share an order of fries, while and just talk to them about how their week was or whatever's appropriate for their age. Just getting into some neutral space for a little bit to give them a minute to just take a deep breath, especially if you have a sensitive child. The other thing that we used to do is, we had 2 little boys. So pretty much as soon as they would hit the door on Friday nights, because we had week on, week off there pretty quick, Thomas would be like, "Okay, get your swimming trunks on. We're going to the pool." And we would just immediately, I think the 2 things, especially for boys, are food and exercise. Just no matter the age, that's like the immediate thing, is, a snack or some kind of food and exercise. And I would assume that that's probably true of girls too. But boys are just a little bit more rambunctious, obviously. And I think that exercise component, particularly for boys, is really, really important because they tend to be very, physically active and all that kind of thing. So kind of look at those types of natural inclinations of your child. Maybe your child, if you have a little girl that's kind of an introvert, maybe you create a little space in the house where she can go and sit, and I don't know if she likes to color or she likes to paint or she likes to whatever. Maybe you let her go focus on that activity first. And the other thing that we didn't do is we didn't plan a whole lot for transition day. So we tried not to have a lot of activities going on and that kind of thing. And that got more and more true the older they got. The older they got, the more they wanted to just come in, go to their room, chill for that evening, and not have to go to dinner with us, or for us to really try to engage them at dinner in big, heavy conversation, or plan a movie night, or, like ask things of them to emotionally engage with us. We tried really hard not to do that, and just to give them their space to kind of decompress. We forget that they're little human beings. And so they're going to need the same types of downtime that we need when we transition between different environments. I hope that's helpful. If you'd like to learn more about my coaching services, please go to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP coaching. There's a link on that page where you can make an appointment for a free phone call with one of my staff to learn more about my services and how I might be able to help you on this journey. Okay, see you guys next time.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the